Imagine boarding a flight, expecting calm, comfort, and a moment of peace before an important day. But instead, you find yourself stripped of your rightful seat by a stranger's arrogance. This is the reality Zara Mitchell, a powerful and poised black CEO, faced on Flight 482. Dressed sharply and ready to conquer the world, she was met with dismissal and disrespect that went far beyond a simple seating dispute. Who was this man who took her seat? Why did he believe he had the right? And what happens when quiet dignity meets systemic injustice? At 35,000 feet, Zara's story is not just about a stolen seat. It's a story of resilience, betrayal, and a battle against a hidden corporate machine designed to silence voices like hers. As you watch, ask yourself, what would you do if your place was stolen, not just on a plane, but in society? How far would you go to reclaim your dignity and fight back against an empire built on exclusion? Join us as we unfold Zara Mitchell's journey, a story of courage, justice, and the relentless pursuit of truth. If you believe in standing up for what's right, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's begin this powerful story together. Zara Mitchell stepped onto the jet bridge with calm purpose. The early morning sun cast a soft glow through the glass windows, reflecting off the polished metal fuselage of Flight 482. She adjusted the strap of her leather briefcase and smoothed the lapels of her tailored navy blazer. This was no ordinary flight for her. It was the final leg before a major Senate briefing that could shape the future of AI education funding across the country. Her assistant Jenna had handled the check-in hours ago. Everything was scheduled to run like clockwork. 4 hours of flight time would give Zara the quiet space she needed to review her notes, collect her thoughts, and prepare mentally for the storm she anticipated on the ground. But as Zara approached the first-class cabin door and reached for the handle, a flicker of unease touched the back of her mind. She stepped inside, heart steady, eyes scanning quickly for her seat. 1A, the pinnacle of the cabin, reserved for the CEO of Novatech Education, a woman who had climbed through firewalls and boardrooms alike to claim her rightful place at the top. But the seat was occupied. A man sat there, one leg crossed over the other, elbow resting on the armrest. His face was turned down toward his phone, a faint smirk playing on his lips as Zara's presence registered, or rather, was dismissed with a glance that barely lifted. Ethan Caldwell was a man in his early 50s, his graying hair combed neatly to the side. His tan suit was sharp, a shade too bright for the early hour. He exuded confidence, entitlement even, as though the whole cabin belonged to him and the seat Zara had reserved was merely a suggestion. She cleared her throat softly, holding her boarding pass in hand, the small laminated rectangle that confirmed her status. "Excuse me, sir," she said evenly, with the calm authority of someone who had faced down far greater challenges. "I believe you are in my seat." Ethan barely looked up. "No, ma'am," he said with a condescending smile. "This is my seat." Zara's lips pressed into a thin line. There was a weight in the air now, not just between them, but radiating out into the cabin. Other passengers began to look up from their devices, sensing the tension like an electric charge. "I'm sorry, but I think you must be mistaken. My boarding pass says 1A. He let out a quiet chuckle, sharp and dry. "This seat isn't for charity cases," he said, eyes glinting with amusement. The words landed like a slap. Zara felt the sting but did not flinch. She knew this look all too well, the dismissive, patronizing gaze aimed at women like her, women who dared to claim space where they were never expected to belong. Behind her, a woman in 1B shifted uneasily in her seat, a few rows back. A young man pulled out his phone, fingers already poised to capture the scene unfolding. Zara's voice remained calm, steady as a river's flow. "My name is Zara Mitchell. This seat is mine, confirmed and secured weeks ago. I ask you to please move." Ethan leaned back, crossing his arms with deliberate casualness. "I always sit here," he said. "Platinum status. Your name might be on paper, but that doesn't mean you belong." The flight attendant appeared then, stepping forward with practiced professionalism. "Sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Ethan handed it over with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. The attendant studied it briefly, then looked at Zara with a flicker of apology. "Miss Mitchell, you are indeed assigned 1A." Ethan's smile faltered for just a moment before he shrugged. "It must be a system error," he said. "But I'm sitting here today. It's not a big deal. For Zara, it was everything." More passengers began boarding, their eyes darting between the two of them. Whispers filled the cabin like a rising tide. Some were sympathetic, others curious or confused. Inside, Zara's mind raced. She felt the familiar churn of emotions, anger, frustration, but above all, determination. She was not here to fight. She was here to hold her ground. The flight attendant tried once more. "Sir, we need to begin boarding procedures. Could you please take your assigned seat?" "No," Ethan said firmly. "This is ridiculous." His voice had risen just enough for a woman nearby to frown and a man to mutter under his breath. The cabin hummed with tension. Then, from the cockpit, a calm but firm voice echoed over the speaker. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently experiencing a delay due to a potential security concern. Please remain seated." The cabin fell silent. A security concern. The words spread quickly, whispers turning into murmurs. Passengers exchanged looks, clutching belongings a little tighter, holding their breath a little longer. Zara stood still, boarding pass clenched in one hand, eyes fixed ahead. She had no intention of sitting anywhere else. A man in a dark suit stepped into the cabin entrance, his expression unreadable. "Miss Mitchell," he said quietly, "could you step into the jet bridge for a moment?" Zara nodded, following him out as murmurs swelled behind her. She felt the weight of 1,000 silent judgments, but also the sharp pulse of something else, anticipation. She was no stranger to battlefields. This was just the beginning. The jet bridge's fluorescent lights hummed softly as Zara Mitchell followed the man in the dark suit. Her breath was steady, her posture upright but relaxed. Inside, her mind was anything but calm. Questions churned beneath her composed exterior. How had this happened? How had a man like Ethan Caldwell dared to occupy her seat so brazenly? And what did this small battle on the airplane say about the larger war she faced every day in the boardrooms, in the halls of power, and in the very fabric of the industries she sought to change? She reached the small waiting area just outside the cabin door and took a seat. The cold plastic chair was uncomfortable, but she barely noticed. Her thoughts raced through the events that had just unfolded. The dismissive smirk, the patronizing tone, the way Ethan's eyes had flicked over her as if she were invisible. The words he had said, "This seat isn't for charity cases," echoed in her mind. The quiet violence behind those words was a cruelty she knew all too well. Back inside the cabin, Ethan Caldwell sat smugly in her seat. His fingers danced over his phone screen, checking messages or perhaps watching the live reactions online. He seemed confident, untouchable, convinced that his status and privilege made him untouchable. But cracks had already begun to appear in his armor. Passengers whispered and glanced at their phones, the glow of screens casting eerie light over their faces. Tessa Morgan, a young vlogger seated just a few rows behind, was no longer discreet. Her phone was out, her camera app live streaming the scene with calm objectivity. No dramatic commentary, just unfiltered footage of a black woman being removed from her rightful seat by a man wielding entitlement like a weapon. Within minutes, the stream had hundreds of viewers, growing exponentially. Zara imagined the messages flooding in, some filled with outrage, others with disbelief. The world was watching. The simple injustice that had begun as a small moment inside an airplane cabin was fast becoming a symbol of something much larger. Meanwhile, Jenna Ross, Zara's assistant, was already coordinating from the airport lounge. The text messages between them flew back and forth. Jenna's fingers flew over her tablet as she reached out to legal counsel and PR teams, preparing for whatever would come next. Zara's internal dialogue churned. The line between composure and fury felt razor thin. She had spent years honing the ability to stay calm in the face of discrimination, to respond not with fire, but with precision and grace. But sometimes, the weight of it all pressed down with suffocating intensity. What was it about this moment that felt so different? Why did this seat, this one small piece of space, feel like the epicenter of a storm that threatened to uproot everything she had built? She thought of the countless hours spent fighting for recognition, for respect, for equal footing in industries long dominated by others, the coded microaggressions, the assumptions about her competence, the silences that spoke volumes. This was not just about a seat on a plane. It was about acknowledgement, about justice. As she sat there, she felt a quiet determination settle over her. This was her moment to stand firm, not just for herself, but for every woman and person of color who had ever been told they did not belong. Inside the cabin, the murmurs had grown louder. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. A few exchanged whispers. The flight attendants tried to maintain their usual polite smiles, but the tension was palpable. Captain Miles Harper had appeared briefly, exchanging quiet words with the purser before retreating to the cockpit. Zara imagined the unease behind his experienced eyes. The announcement came again over the speaker, calm but firm. Due to a security verification protocol, boarding was temporarily suspended. Passengers were asked to remain seated. Zara knew that phrase well. A security concern was the polite way of saying something was seriously wrong, and it carried implications far beyond the delay itself. She closed her eyes briefly and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her mind flicked to the plan she had rehearsed countless times. Activate the contingency. Let the legal team prepare for full engagement. Let the world bear witness. Her phone buzzed quietly on the chair beside her. A text from Jenna Livestream is already trending. We've got eyes everywhere. Stay strong. Zara felt a small flicker of reassurance. She was not alone, but even as the support grew, so did the internal battle within her. Was she strong enough to withstand the storm ahead, to face the legal battles, the public scrutiny, the personal attacks that she knew would come? A part of her longed to retreat, to find solace away from the spotlight. But the larger part, the part forged through years of resilience and purpose, refused to back down. Back on the plane! Ethan Caldwell's confidence began to waver. He glanced around the cabin, sensing the shift. The smugness that had defined his demeanor was giving way to something else unease. He noticed Tessa's phone pointed directly at him, streaming live to thousands. He saw passengers exchanging glances filled with judgment. Even some of the crew cast subtle, wary looks his way. His fingers trembled slightly as he put down his phone. The man who had believed himself untouchable was suddenly very aware of the cracks forming in his carefully constructed world. The flight attendant approached him again quietly. "Sir." Would you please remain seated? Airport security will meet you upon landing for a routine clearance. Ethan's jaw clenched. This was no longer a simple dispute over a seat. This was a reckoning. Zara's phone vibrated again. Another message from Jenna legal team ready. They're watching the stream. You've got this. In that moment, Zara allowed herself a quiet smile. She had never wanted conflict. She had wanted peace. But she knew that sometimes peace required standing in the storm. She would hold her seat, not just the one on this plane, but the seat she had earned in every room she entered. She would stand for those who could not. As she waited outside the cabin door, the weight of history and hope pressed on her shoulders, but her spirit remained unbroken. The fight was just beginning. Zara sat quietly in the sterile jet bridge waiting area. The soft hum of the airport's distant bustle barely filtered through the thick glass walls. Her breathing was slow and deliberate as she prepared herself for what she knew was coming. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out her phone, fingers deftly navigating through encrypted apps. With a calmness that belied the storm inside, she activated Protocol Shadow, a contingency plan designed for moments just like this. Protocol Shadow was more than just a phrase. It was a carefully constructed network of allies, legal protections, and digital defenses built over years of anticipating resistance from entrenched power. It was a silent weapon, unseen but deadly effective. And as the activation confirmation appeared on her screen, Zara felt a slight tightening in her chest, a mixture of relief and renewed resolve. Back inside the aircraft, passengers remained seated as the cabin lights subtly shifted from their usual warm glow to a neutral white. It was a discreet signal, unnoticed by most, but instantly recognized by the crew. The lead flight attendant, Claire Reynolds, felt the vibration on her wristband, a signal that this was no ordinary delay. Captain Miles Harper stood in the cockpit, his experienced eyes scanning the message on his screen. Passenger 1A was confirmed as a high-priority federal asset with clearance level 3. Initiate verification protocol and proceed with discretion. The captain nodded grimly, knowing this flight had just become much more complicated. Meanwhile, Ethan Caldwell remained slouched in Zara's seat, scrolling through his phone but increasingly distracted by the changing atmosphere around him. The quiet shift in lighting, the flicker of anxious glances, the unmistakable tension. It was like watching a tide slowly turn against him. In the back of the cabin, Tessa Morgan kept her phone steady, live streaming the scene with a calm focus that resonated with her thousands of viewers. Her viewers weren't just watching, they were witnessing a moment of silent defiance that transcended the cramped confines of an airplane seat. Zara's mind was racing, but her face showed none of it. Protocol Shadow was not just about legal recourse. It was about sending a message, about showing the world that she would not be pushed aside, that she would claim every inch of space she had earned, even if it meant freezing the entire flight. She thought about the countless times she had been underestimated, dismissed, or outright ignored because of her race and gender. Each microaggression, each subtle slight had built the steel of her resolve. This moment was not just about a seat on a plane. It was about the legacy she wanted to leave for every young black girl watching, wondering if they too belonged in rooms that seemed designed to exclude them. A soft chime sounded through the cabin, signaling the activation of the override directive from an external source. The captain stood and made his way toward the cabin door, preparing to address the passengers. Zara took a deep breath and adjusted the strap on her bag. She felt the eyes of the crew on her as she moved back toward the cabin. Ethan caught the movement and looked up. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. He tried to maintain his composure, but it was slipping like sand through his fingers. He had expected a simple disruption, perhaps a minor inconvenience. He had not anticipated a full-scale intervention. Zara re-entered the cabin silently, her every step measured and calm. The cabin grew still as the passengers turned their attention to her. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. She walked down the aisle to seat 1A with the quiet authority of someone who belonged. She paused briefly to meet Ethan's gaze. No words were exchanged, but the message was clear. The man who had stolen her seat was now on notice. He rose slowly, gathering his belongings without a word of apology or defiance. He passed by Zara with eyes fixed on the floor. The captain's voice came again over the intercom, firmer this time. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now cleared to resume boarding and prepare for departure. Thank you for your patience." As the cabin exhaled collectively, the engines hummed back to life, but the tension lingered like an invisible weight. Zara returned to her seat, hands resting lightly on her lap, her spine straight and poised. Her phone buzzed gently with a secure notification. It was Jenna, confirming the live stream had exploded across social media platforms, the story rapidly reaching millions. Jenna's message was simple but powerful. "We have eyes everywhere. You're not alone." Zara allowed herself a faint smile before turning her attention to the window. Outside, the jet bridge slowly withdrew, revealing the runway bathed in golden morning light. The world was watching. The battle was far from over, but she had made her stand. Inside her, the internal struggle raged quietly. She fought against exhaustion, doubt, and the desire to retreat. Yet beneath it all, a fierce determination burned. This fight was bigger than her, bigger than one seat. It was about rewriting the rules of who belonged and who was allowed to take space in every sphere of power. Across the aisle, Tessa lowered her camera briefly, her voice barely a whisper. "History is being written today." Zara closed her eyes for a moment, imagining the generations who would follow the young girls and boys who would see this moment and know that they too could hold their ground. She was ready for whatever came next. Back in her seat, Zara Mitchell could feel the tension ripple through the cabin like a silent wave. The once calm atmosphere had fractured, replaced by a low murmur of whispers and the quiet hum of phones lighting up. Across the aisle, Tessa Morgan's phone remained steady, her eyes sharp and focused. The live stream was no longer just a personal project. It had become a beacon for thousands tuning in, hungry for truth and justice. Within minutes, the viewer count had skyrocketed. Messages flooded in outrage, support, disbelief. The hashtags started forming. "Hold your seat." "Justice in flight." Zara Mitchell. The story was no longer confined to the metal walls of Flight 482. It was exploding across the digital landscape, igniting conversations in living rooms, newsrooms, and boardrooms alike. Zara felt a familiar blend of emotions: gratitude for the growing support, frustration at the injustice that had sparked it, and a steady flame of resolve, the kind that had driven her since the earliest days of her career. Jenna's text buzzed again. "Media outlets are picking up the stream. PR teams are mobilizing. We're ready to push the narrative on our terms." Zara nodded to herself, even though no one could see. The battle was no longer just about a seat on a plane. It was about controlling the story, framing the truth. But the path forward was still uncertain. There was the question of trust, how much to reveal, when to push back, and how to keep the focus on the larger fight rather than the personal affront. She remembered the faces of the passengers around her. Some watched with quiet curiosity, others with barely concealed discomfort. A mother clutched her toddler a little tighter. An elderly man adjusted his glasses and stared straight ahead. No one wanted to be caught in the crossfire, yet no one could look away. Ethan Caldwell sat rigid in Zara's seat. His expression was tight now, the confidence of earlier replaced by a simmering unease. He checked his phone repeatedly, no doubt watching the growing storm unfold online. Yet he said nothing, his silence a stark contrast to the loud accusations building in the digital ether. The flight attendant approached him again, this time with a firmer tone. "Sir, please remain seated. Security will meet you upon arrival for a routine clearance check." Ethan looked up sharply, but said nothing. His eyes flicked to the live stream on Tessa's phone. The room seemed to close in around him. The man who had believed himself untouchable was suddenly on the defensive. Meanwhile, Zara's mind was working through the implications. The flight delay was just the start. The legal challenges ahead, the media scrutiny, the political fallout, all were looming. Yet she knew that this moment, messy and fraught as it was, carried the seeds of change. As she sat, a wave of doubt washed over her briefly. Was this battle worth the personal cost? The late nights, the public spotlight, the endless questions? She thought of her family, her late father, who had always taught her to stand firm no matter the storm. She thought of the young black girls who watched her now, their futures tied to the outcome of this fight. A soft vibration from her phone pulled her back. Jenna's message read, "Keep your head up. This is just the beginning, but you're already winning." Zara allowed herself a small, quiet smile. The fight was far from over, but she was ready. Outside, the jet bridge retracted slowly, revealing the runway bathed in the soft light of early morning. The engines hummed louder. The flight crew prepared to resume their duties, but the energy in the cabin had shifted irrevocably. Passengers whispered about the incident, some expressing solidarity, others skepticism. Conversations about race, power, and entitlement surfaced naturally, breaking years of unspoken tension. Tessa's live stream had become a digital courtroom where every viewer was a juror. Comments poured in, sharing personal stories, calling out systemic injustices, demanding accountability. Zara watched the chat grow with a sense of responsibility. Every word mattered. Suddenly, a message popped up from an unexpected source. Henry Clark, a former CEO of a rival tech company and a respected figure in the industry, had begun amplifying the story on his own channels. His endorsement lent weight and credibility that no one could ignore. Jenna immediately alerted Zara. "Henry's on board. This is huge." Zara took a deep breath. Allies like Henry could turn the tide, but they also brought new complexities, politics, old rivalries, and the weight of expectations all came with the territory. The flight attendant announced over the PA system, "We appreciate your patience. Boarding will resume shortly." Zara prepared herself to return to her seat, aware that every move would be scrutinized. She was no longer just a passenger. She was a symbol of resistance and resilience. As she walked back into the cabin, eyes followed her. The murmurs hushed to whispers of respect. She took her seat with quiet dignity, hands resting on her lap, eyes fixed ahead. The journey ahead was long, but Zara Mitchell was ready to travel every mile with purpose. The hum of the engines was steady now as Flight 482 cruised above the clouds. Inside the cabin, a fragile calm had settled, but beneath the surface, the currents of change were unstoppable. Zara Mitchell sat quietly, her fingers lightly tapping the armrest as she contemplated the whirlwind that had unfolded over the last hour. The live stream, the viral hashtags, The murmurs of passengers, all were pieces of a puzzle falling into place. Her phone vibrated gently. It was Jenna. Henry Clark reached out. Wants to speak privately. Thinks he can help. Zara's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Henry was not just any ally. As the former CEO of Veritas Technologies, he had once been a fierce competitor to her own company. Their history was complicated, a tangled web of rivalry, respect, and grudging admiration. If Henry was stepping forward now, it meant the stakes were higher than ever. A few moments later, a discreet knock came at the jet bridge door. Jenna entered, a mix of urgency and reassurance in her eyes. He's waiting in the conference room near Gate 17. You ready? Zara nodded, rising from her seat. The walk to the conference room was brief, but felt heavy with significance. She passed by clusters of passengers still buzzing about the earlier confrontation, their whispered conversations blending into a low murmur. The cabin crew exchanged glances, some offering subtle nods of support as she moved by. The conference room was modest but secure, equipped with the latest communications technology. Henry Clark stood by the window, looking out over the runway. When he turned, his expression was measured but resolute. Zara, he began, his voice steady. I've been watching this unfold. What happened to you on that plane isn't just a personal slight. It's a symptom of a deeper problem, one that's been allowed to fester in every corner of our industry. Zara took a seat, meeting his gaze. I know, Henry sighed, rubbing his hands together. I've seen how the game is played. The backroom deals, the subtle exclusions, the calculated dismissals of anyone who threatens the status quo. You're not just fighting for a seat on a plane. You're fighting for the right to be seen and heard in a world that's been built to ignore people like you. A flicker of something passed through Zara's eyes, a mixture of gratitude and wariness. Why come forward now? Because the tide is turning, Henry said firmly. And because I believe in the future you're building. It's not just about business anymore. It's about justice. About making sure that the next generation doesn't have to fight the same battles. Their conversation was interrupted by Jenna's arrival, carrying a tablet loaded with real-time analytics from the social media storm. The numbers were staggering. The live stream had reached millions. Influential voices across the tech world had taken notice. This was no longer just a story. It was a movement. Zara glanced at the screen, her heart steady but racing beneath the surface. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for. But with opportunity came risk. What's our next move? She asked. Henry leaned forward. We mobilize. Legal teams, PR experts, industry leaders. We control the narrative and push for accountability. More importantly, we prepare for the inevitable backlash. You're going to face resistance from those who benefit from the old ways, and from those who fear change. Zara nodded slowly. Her mind raced through the logistics, the Senate hearing, the media blitz, the corporate pressure that was sure to come. But beneath it all was the steady pulse of purpose. She thought of the countless people who had quietly supported her journey, the mentors who had believed when few others did. She thought of the young innovators watching her now, waiting for a sign that they too could break through barriers. Henry's phone buzzed suddenly, breaking the moment. He glanced at the screen, then back at Zara. We have an unexpected complication. One of your closest allies, a member of your inner team, has been compromised. Zara's stomach tightened. Betrayal was a weapon she had learned to anticipate, but it never got easier. Who? She asked quietly. Caleb Bennett, Henry said. He's been feeding information to the opposition. The room seemed to close in for a moment. Zara's thoughts flicked rapidly. Caleb had been with her since the beginning. a trusted advisor who had helped build the foundation of Novatech. The revelation cut deep, but there was no time to dwell. The fight was moving too fast. "We'll handle this," Henry assured her. "But you need to prepare for what's next. The opposition won't stop at your seat on a plane. They'll come for everything you've built." Zara took a deep breath and stood. "Then we make sure they don't win." Back on the plane, the passengers were settling in for the long haul. But for Zara Mitchell, the journey had only just begun. The soft hum of the aircraft's engines was a constant reminder that the world outside their small cabin moved forward relentlessly. Inside, however, the atmosphere was thick with tension and uncertainty. Zara Mitchell sat alone near the window, her mind swirling with the revelation that Caleb Bennett, once a trusted confidant, was now a source of betrayal. The news had hit her like a wave, unexpected and shattering. Caleb had been there through every milestone, the late-night strategizing, the intense negotiations, the victories, and setbacks alike. To learn he had been feeding information to their opponents felt like a personal wound, deep and painful. Jenna Ross approached quietly, her expression guarded. "Zara, the legal team is already looking into it. They're tracing the data leaks and communication trails. It's worse than we thought." Zara's fingers tightened around the armrest as she nodded. "How did we miss it?" She whispered more to herself than anyone else. Jenna shook her head slowly. "Sometimes the hardest battles are fought within." Caleb's access gave him the ability to undermine us quietly, piece by piece. Zara closed her eyes, willing herself to stay calm. Betrayal was a harsh reality in her world, but it didn't define her. What defined her was how she chose to respond. Her thoughts drifted back to the early days of Novatech, when trust had been her most precious currency. Caleb had been more than a partner, almost family. She wondered what had driven him to turn against them. Was it fear, greed, pressure from the opposition, or something else entirely? A soft chime from her phone pulled her back to the present. Jenna glanced at the screen. "We intercepted another message. It's a plan to sabotage your upcoming Senate testimony. They want to discredit you publicly. Make this about personal drama rather than systemic injustice." Zara swallowed hard. The stakes had never been higher. This was no longer just about a stolen seat or a viral live stream. It was about her entire mission, her work to bring equity and justice to a system rigged against people like her. As she sat there, her mind flickered with moments of doubt and exhaustion. Could she withstand the pressure? Could she continue to lead when the opposition was so relentless and insidious? But then, like a steady flame in the darkness, the memory of her father's voice came to her. Strength is not just about fighting the storms, Zara. It's about standing tall, even when the skies are gray. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes. The fight was far from over, and she would face it head on. Meanwhile, Caleb Bennett sat in a private suite at the airport, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. He had never imagined the depths to which the opposition would sink, nor the consequences he would face when his betrayal came to light. In a tense phone call, he attempted to justify his actions. "It wasn't supposed to go this far. I was trying to protect the company, protect you. But the damage was done. Trust was broken, alliances shattered. And now, the opposition had a foothold they could exploit." Back on the plane, Zara convened a quiet meeting with Jenna and Samuel Price, her lead attorney. The three women strategized in hushed tones, plotting the next moves in a battle that was as much about perception as it was about law. Samuel's voice was calm but firm. We need to control the narrative and preempt their attacks. Discrediting you is their main weapon. We'll gather evidence, expose their tactics, and turn the spotlight back where it belongs on the systemic injustice," Jenna added. "We've coordinated with media allies. The truth will come out, but timing and precision are key." Zara nodded, feeling a renewed sense of clarity. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also revealed the lengths to which the opposition feared her. That fear was a sign they were on the right path. As the plane soared above the clouds, the battle within and without raged on. Zara Mitchell was no longer just a passenger on this flight. She was the captain of a revolution. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the flight cruised steadily toward its destination. But inside, the atmosphere crackled with a tension that no ambient lighting could soften. Zara Mitchell sat upright in seat 1A, her gaze calm yet unwavering as Ethan Caldwell rose from the business class seat he had been relegated to. The moment had come for a confrontation neither could avoid. The cabin crew exchanged anxious glances as the two figures faced each other across the aisle. Ethan's expression was tight, eyes flicking nervously toward the live stream on several phones around the cabin. His usual smug confidence had given way to a cold determination, a last attempt to regain control of a situation spiraling rapidly beyond his grasp. Zara felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, passengers and crew alike sensing the significance of this clash. But she was resolute, prepared to meet the challenge with the strength and dignity that had defined her journey. Samuel Price, Zara's lead attorney, stood discreetly nearby, ready to intervene if necessary, but trusting in Zara's ability to command the room. Jenna Ross, her assistant, quietly relayed updates from the outside world news outlets, social media, and legal counsel, all watching with bated breath. Ethan cleared his throat and spoke first, his voice low but carrying through the cabin with surprising clarity. "Zara, this is ridiculous. You're making a spectacle of yourself, of all of us. This isn't just about a seat. It's about respect, something you apparently demand but don't always deserve." His words landed harshly, intended to provoke. A ripple of discomfort passed through the cabin, some passengers shifting in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or remain silent observers. Zara's response was measured, each word deliberate and clear. "Respect is earned. Ethan, not assumed, and entitlement is not a substitute for integrity." The tension thickened. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You think this is a battle you can win with words? This is power, and power doesn't bend to your will." Zara's gaze did not waver. Power without justice is meaningless, and those who wield it without conscience will always be challenged. Passengers watched in silence as the verbal duel unfolded. The underlying currents of systemic injustice and personal struggle made manifest in this confined space miles above the earth. Suddenly, Ethan stepped forward, the sharp edge of his presence cutting through the cabin's quiet. "You want to play the victim. Use your connections. You're nothing but a disruptor." Zara stood, meeting him eye to eye, her voice steady but resolute. "I am a leader, and leadership means standing for what is right, even when it is uncomfortable." A murmur of approval rippled through some of the passengers, others exchanging uneasy glances. The divide was palpable, a microcosm of a larger societal reckoning playing out in real time. At that moment, Captain Miles Harper emerged from the cockpit, his face calm but authoritative. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask for your cooperation as we work through these challenges. We are committed to ensuring everyone's safety and dignity." His words carried weight, a reminder that this was more than a personal dispute. It was an incident with broader implications for safety, security, and ethics. Zara's mind raced, aware that every word, every gesture was being recorded, dissected, and analyzed by millions watching beyond these metal walls. This confrontation was no longer private. It was a public reckoning. Ethan's voice grew louder, desperation creeping in. You think you can stop progress with this stunt? You're going to ruin everything we've built. Zara's eyes softened briefly, a flicker of empathy shining through her steely exterior. Progress without equality is just a half-truth, and I'm here to fight for the whole story. The cabin held its breath. Then quietly, Tessa Morgan resumed her live stream, capturing every moment with a calm precision that spoke volumes. Her viewers surged as the story unfolded in real time. Behind the scenes, Jenna whispered to Samuel, "Legal is ready. They're monitoring every word." Samuel nodded, eyes sharp. "We'll file reports immediately after landing. This is evidence." Zara took a slow breath, grounding herself in the purpose that had brought her here. She was not just defending a seat, she was defending the principle that no one should be denied their rightful place due to bias or entitlement. The minutes stretched, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved conflict. Then, as the plane began its descent, Ethan slumped back into his seat, the fight draining from his posture. Zara exhaled softly, relief mingling with exhaustion. The battle had been fierce, but she had held her ground. As the city skyline came into view, sparkling beneath the setting sun, Zara allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. This fight was far from over, but she was ready for the challenges ahead. The cabin lights brightened, signaling the final approach. Passengers prepared for landing, their whispers now tinged with admiration and hope. Zara settled back into her seat, eyes fixed on the horizon, her spirit unbroken and her mission clear. The wheels of Flight 482 kissed the runway with a gentle thud. Passengers shifted in their seats, the tension that had filled the cabin since takeoff slowly ebbing as the plane taxied toward the gate. But for Zara Mitchell, the landing was just the beginning of another chapter in this unfolding saga. As the aircraft came to a complete stop, a quiet but firm voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you remain seated while we coordinate with federal authorities to address a security matter. We appreciate your cooperation." Zara's heart beat steadily. She had anticipated this moment, but knowing it was coming did not ease the weight of responsibility pressing on her shoulders. She exchanged a brief glance with Jenna, who gave a subtle nod reassurance without words. The cabin door opened, and two men in dark suits and discreet earpieces stepped aboard. Their movements were professional and controlled, radiating the calm authority of federal agents accustomed to high-stakes situations. One of them approached Zara with measured respect. "Miss Mitchell, I am Special Agent Laura Bennett, and this is Special Agent Marcus Hale. We are here to assist and ensure that this matter is handled discreetly and efficiently." Zara stood gracefully, acknowledging the agents. "Thank you. I am prepared to cooperate fully." The agents gestured for Zara to follow them off the plane, and Jenna rose immediately to accompany her. As they exited, the cabin murmurs swelled. Phones lit up, capturing the scene in real time, broadcasting the presence of federal intervention to thousands more watching online. Outside, in a secured terminal suite, the atmosphere was stark but charged with purpose. Agents, legal counsel, and technical experts gathered to discuss the next steps. Agent Bennett laid out the situation succinctly. "Miss Mitchell, your situation has drawn considerable attention, and we have initiated a preliminary investigation into potential corporate sabotage and interference. We are mobilizing resources to support you and uncover the full scope of the opposition's actions." Zara listened intently, her mind already racing through the implications. The battle was no longer confined to boardrooms or social media. It had entered the realm of federal oversight, a sign that the powers at play recognized the seriousness of the threat she represented. Jenna relayed updates on the live stream and public reaction. The story was trending worldwide, sparking discussions not just about the stolen seat, but about systemic inequalities in corporate America. Agent Hale added, "We are coordinating with the Department of Justice and other agencies to ensure that those responsible are held accountable. Your cooperation and testimony will be critical." Zara nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. She was not just a witness, but a catalyst for change, carrying the hopes of many on her shoulders. Meanwhile, back on the plane, Ethan Caldwell sat alone, in seat 4C. The once confident man now appeared diminished, the presence of federal agents casting a long shadow over his facade. Flight attendants moved with renewed purpose, aware that the situation was far from over. Passengers whispered among themselves, some offering discreet nods of support toward Zara's empty seat. The live stream continued to capture every detail, feeding the growing narrative of resistance and justice. Zara's legal team worked swiftly to prepare for upcoming hearings, gathering evidence and coordinating with federal officials. The stakes had never been higher, but neither had her resolve. In a quiet moment, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her here, the years of perseverance, the sacrifices, the moments of doubt overcome by fierce determination. She thought of the young innovators watching from afar, the future leaders whose paths she was helping to clear. This fight was not just hers, it was theirs. As the federal agents briefed her on next steps, Zara felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, but the tide was turning. The battle for justice was no longer a quiet resistance. It was a force gathering strength with every passing moment. The courtroom was a far cry from the polished steel and soft lighting of the airplane cabin. But for Zara Mitchell, the gravity of the moment was just as intense. Rows of seats filled with journalists, legal teams, and interested citizens bore witness to the beginning of a battle that transcended one stolen seat. This was a fight for justice, equity, and accountability. Zara sat composed at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Samuel Price and her legal team. Her eyes scanned the room calmly, the weight of months of preparation reflected in her steady gaze. She was ready to tell her story, not just the story of a moment on a plane, but the systemic injustices that had pushed her to this point. The judge entered, his presence commanding silence. The room settled as proceedings began. The case was formally opened as an investigation into corporate sabotage, discrimination, and obstruction of justice. The opposition's legal counsel wasted no time in attacking Zara's credibility. They painted her as a disruptor, an opportunist using a minor incident to garner publicity. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as they questioned her every word, attempting to chip away at her character. But Zara remained unfazed. When it was her turn to speak, her voice was clear, measured, and full of quiet strength. She recounted the events on Flight 482, the confrontation with Ethan Caldwell, the activation of Protocol Shadow, the viral livestream, and the federal investigation that followed. She spoke not just as a victim, but as a leader. She detailed the years of battling bias in corporate America, the subtle but pervasive ways people like her were marginalized and dismissed. Her words struck a chord, drawing empathy from many in the courtroom. Outside, the story exploded across the media. Social networks lit up with hashtags supporting Zara and condemning the actions of those who tried to silence her. Hashtags like #Justice for Zara and #Hold Your Seat became rallying cries for millions. Tessa Morgan's livestream continued to gather viewers, her calm narration a steady thread in the unfolding drama. Journalists across networks dissected the legal arguments and the social implications, turning the case into a national conversation about race, power, and corporate ethics. Zara's internal struggle was palpable even in the public eye. She wrestled with the pressure of exposure, the strain of scrutiny, and the weight of expectations placed upon her by a community hungry for change. But she also felt the unyielding support of allies old and new. Henry Clark's endorsement proved invaluable, lending credibility and amplifying her message. Derek Foster, a longtime industry advocate, organized forums and panel discussions to further public understanding of the systemic issues at stake. Yet amid the momentum, opposition forces regrouped. Behind closed doors, strategies were devised to discredit Zara, to sow doubt and division. Social media bots churned out false narratives and character attacks. The fight was far from over. At one point, Zara's team uncovered a coordinated campaign aimed at undermining the livestream's reach and credibility. Jenna worked tirelessly with tech experts to counteract these efforts, ensuring that the truth remained visible. Throughout it all, Zara remained grounded by the memory of her father's advice: strength in adversity, grace under pressure, and the belief that perseverance could change the world. During a particularly emotional moment in court, Zara paused to look around at the faces before her, some skeptical, some supportive, many inspired. She spoke directly to the heart of the matter. This was not just about her. It was about every person who had ever been denied a seat at the table because of who they were. Her testimony moved many to tears, her words echoing long after she left the stand. Meanwhile, Ethan Caldwell's public image unraveled rapidly. Press conferences and social media posts attempted to defend his actions, but the growing wave of accountability left little room for spin. The company he represented faced increasing scrutiny, shareholders questioning leadership decisions, and investors growing wary. The ripple effects of this legal battle threatened to reshape entire industries. In the courtroom, legal experts debated new precedents about corporate responsibility and the rights of individuals within institutional power structures. Zara's case was becoming a landmark, inspiring similar actions nationwide. The day closed with a standing ovation from advocates and allies gathered outside the courthouse. For Zara, it was a moment of triumph, tempered by the knowledge that the road ahead would be long. As she left the courtroom, surrounded by her team, Zara allowed herself a brief smile. The battle for justice was no longer a distant dream. It was unfolding in real time, driven by the courage to hold the powerful accountable. The days following the courtroom testimony were a whirlwind of activity and emotion. Zara Mitchell's story had captured the nation's attention, stirring debates about justice, equality, and corporate ethics. But amid the growing support was a tide of resistance, the entrenched powers determined to maintain the status quo. In her hotel room overlooking the city skyline, Zara sat with Jenna and Samuel, reviewing the latest developments. Their legal team was coordinating with federal agencies, preparing for the next phase of the investigation. The stakes had never been higher. Jenna pointed to a series of media reports and social media analytics. The public was engaged, but misinformation campaigns were gaining traction. We need a decisive move to shift the narrative in our favor. Samuel nodded. It's time to bring forward concrete evidence documents, communications, anything that exposes the depth of the opposition's tactics. Zara agreed. She had long anticipated this moment. With a few taps on her tablet, she activated a secure channel to upload the most sensitive files, internal memos, emails, and recordings that mapped the corporate sabotage in stark detail. The files went live to trusted legal and media partners under a coordinated release. The impact was immediate. Headlines screamed of a massive cover-up, and the phrase shadow vault became synonymous with corporate corruption and systemic racism. Across the country, protests erupted outside corporate headquarters, government buildings, and tech hubs. People demanded accountability and reform. The energy was electric, fueled by the determination of those who refused to be silenced. Zara received messages from young innovators, educators, and activists thanking her for standing up. Each message was a reminder of why this fight mattered. But the opposition pushed back fiercely. Ethan Caldwell's company launched counterclaims, accusing Zara of defamation and breach of contract. Public relations teams worked overtime to discredit her and sow doubt. The pressure mounted, yet Zara's resolve remained unshaken. She leaned on the support of allies like Henry Clark and Derek Foster, whose voices amplified her message and lent credibility to the movement. At a national education summit, Zara was invited to speak about the intersection of technology, ethics, and equity. The auditorium was packed with policymakers, industry leaders, and students. Cameras recorded her every word. She stood at the podium, the weight of her journey evident, but her voice steady. "This fight is not just mine," she said. "It belongs to every person who has ever been told they do not belong. It is a call to action, to dismantle systems that exclude and to build new ones that embrace diversity and justice." The audience erupted in applause. For a moment, the fight felt tangible, the change within reach. Yet behind the scenes, the legal battles raged on. Courtrooms and conference rooms became arenas of strategy and negotiation. Evidence was dissected, witnesses examined, and alliances tested. One evening, as Zara reviewed case files, a message from Special Agent Laura Bennett appeared. The federal investigation had uncovered new leads, offshore accounts, undisclosed communications, and a network of shell companies tied to the opposition's covert operations. Zara's heart raced. The tide was turning. The evidence was irrefutable. In a secure meeting, the legal team formulated a comprehensive plan to present this new information to the court and the public. The goal was clear: to expose the full extent of the corruption and ensure those responsible face justice. As the legal team prepared for the next hearing, Zara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The journey had been arduous, filled with setbacks and sacrifices, but it had also been a testament to resilience, courage, and the power of standing firm. She thought of the young girl who had once asked if she belonged. The answer was clear: now she did. And so did millions like her. The battle was far from over, but the turning point had arrived. The sun cast long shadows across the city as the courthouse steps filled with a swelling crowd of supporters, journalists, and curious onlookers. Zara Mitchell stood at the forefront, calm and composed, despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. Today was more than a court hearing. It was a milestone in a battle for justice that had captivated a nation. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged. Legal teams for both sides prepared their arguments. Evidence spread out on polished tables illuminated by soft overhead lights. Zara sat with Jenna and Samuel close by, their presence a steady anchor amid the tension. The judge entered and called the session to order. The proceedings began with a presentation of the new evidence, detailed financial records, email correspondences, and intercepted communications revealing a calculated campaign of corporate sabotage and racial discrimination orchestrated by Ethan Caldwell and his allies. Zara's voice rang clear when she took the stand. She recounted the years of struggle, the stolen seat, the viral livestream, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Every word was a declaration, a reminder that the fight was not just personal, but systemic. Outside, the crowd grew louder, their chants of support echoing through the halls. Hashtags like Washes Justice for Zara trended worldwide, drawing attention from lawmakers, activists, and everyday citizens inspired by her courage. As the day progressed, witnesses were called former employees, whistleblowers, and experts who testified to the pervasive culture of discrimination and corruption within the opposition's ranks. Their testimonies painted a damning picture, reinforcing Zara's claims. Ethan Caldwell's defense faltered under the weight of the evidence. Attempts to shift blame and sow doubt fell flat in the face of irrefutable facts. His once confident demeanor crumbled, replaced by desperation. Zara's legal team seized the moment, delivering closing arguments that resonated deeply. Samuel Price spoke passionately about accountability and the need to dismantle systems built on exclusion and oppression. When the judge adjourned for deliberation, the courtroom was filled with anticipation. Zara felt the collective breath of those watching, waiting for a verdict that could reshape the future. The announcement came later that evening. The court ruled in favor of Zara Mitchell, affirming her claims and ordering a series of reforms within the opposition's company and broader regulatory measures to prevent future abuses. Applause erupted inside and outside the courtroom. Supporters cheered, tears of relief and joy flowing freely. For Zara, it was a moment of vindication and a call to continue the work ahead. In the days that followed, the Coleman Act was introduced in Congress, named in honor of a mentor who had inspired Zara's journey. The legislation aimed to protect underrepresented founders in technology, ensure equitable access to funding, and strengthen whistleblower protections. Zara was invited to testify before the Senate, her words echoing through chambers filled with lawmakers and advocates. She spoke with conviction about the importance of integrity, transparency, and inclusivity in shaping the future of innovation. Her story inspired a generation, fueling movements across the country to challenge systemic injustice in all its forms. Back in her office, Zara reflected on the long road traveled, the battles fought, the sacrifices made, and the allies gained along the way. She looked at a framed photo on her desk, a reminder of her father's unwavering support and the legacy she carried forward. The journey was far from over, but the tide had irrevocably turned. Justice was in motion, propelled by courage, resilience, and an unyielding belief in the power of standing up for what is right. The morning light filtered softly through the tall windows of the new Novatech headquarters. Zara Mitchell stood near the expansive glass wall, looking out over the city she had fought so hard to protect. The skyline was a testament to progress, resilience, and the promise of change, a mirror of her own journey. The past year had been a whirlwind. From the confrontation on Flight 482 to the federal investigation, the courtroom battles, and the eventual legislative victory, Zara had transformed from a quiet innovator into a symbol of hope and justice. Her phone buzzed gently. It was Jenna, reminding her of the upcoming ceremony, the official launch of the Coleman Fellowship, a new initiative designed to empower underrepresented entrepreneurs and technologists. Zara smiled softly, feeling the weight and warmth of the moment. The ceremony was held in a bright auditorium filled with eager faces, young women and men from diverse backgrounds, all with dreams fueled by the struggles and triumphs that had paved the way. Zara took the stage with grace, the applause washing over her like a wave of shared victory. She spoke from the heart, her voice steady and inspiring. This fellowship is more than a program. It is a commitment to rewrite the rules, to build a future where every voice is heard, every talent nurtured, and every barrier dismantled. The crowd rose in a standing ovation, the energy palpable with hope and determination. For Zara, this was the culmination of years of fight, sacrifice, and unwavering belief in the power of justice. Later, as the event wound down, Zara found a quiet moment with Evelyn Moore, her longtime mentor and steadfast ally. Evelyn handed her a small and worn envelope sealed with red wax. "For the day you claim your seat," she said softly. Zara opened the envelope with reverence, revealing a letter from Evelyn's late father, James Moore, an aviation regulator and ethics pioneer who had quietly supported their cause from the beginning. The letter spoke of courage, legacy, and the importance of building a future that could not be erased. Tears pricked Zara's eyes, but she did not cry. Instead, she felt a profound sense of peace and purpose. The journey had been long and arduous, but it was far from over. With every step forward, she was not only claiming her seat, but carving a path for generations to come. Back at her desk, Zara glanced at a bracelet, a silent reminder of the battles fought and the promises kept. It no longer blinked with urgency, but gleamed softly as a symbol of resilience. The future awaited, vast and open, and Zara Mitchell was ready to meet it head-on. She turned back to the window, the city alive with possibility. The woman who once fought for a seat on a plane now owned the sky. Zara Mitchell's story is a powerful reminder that every act of discrimination, no matter how small it seems, carries a weight far greater than a single moment. It echoes the countless unseen battles faced by those who are told they do not belong. But it is also a story of hope, of strength found in quiet resistance, of justice pursued through resilience, and of a legacy being rewritten for generations to come. We honor Zara's courage and the voices of all those who have been marginalized, and we stand united in calling out injustice wherever it hides on planes, in boardrooms, or across society. No one should ever have to fight for the seat they earned or the respect they deserve. If this story moved you, if it sparked your heart and challenged your mind, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories of courage and truth to light. And stay with us, because this is just the beginning. There are more voices to hear, more battles to witness, and more hope to share. Together, we can change the narrative. Together, we can build a future where everyone's seat is safe,